Wife poisons husband for money, but she didn't see this coming. It started with a smile. The kind of smile that barely touches the corners of the lips but makes its way into the eyes with subtle intensity. Claire knew how to wield that smile like a weapon. She had used it when she first met Daniel, all bright teeth and suggestive laughter in a New York rooftop bar, back when he was still fresh off a promotion and drunk with confidence. That was 4 years ago. Now, she used it differently, like a shield, a lie wrapped in lip gloss. Daniel had changed. Or maybe he hadn't, and she just started seeing clearly. He was obsessive about money, about his company, about being respected. He wasn't cruel, no, that would have made things easier. He was just indifferent, transactional. Everything was measured. Love was a debit and credit in his life. Even the way he touched her had become a choreographed routine, like he was completing a checklist, not seducing a woman. Claire had grown up poor. Trailer park poor. She used to fall asleep to the sound of police sirens and feral dogs. But she was smart, stunning, and unapologetically hungry for more. Meeting Daniel was supposed to be her escape hatch. He offered her a way out, and she'd taken it. But it wasn't long before the mansion in Connecticut felt more like a prison than a palace. The marble countertops, imported wine, and designer heels meant nothing when every conversation ended with him checking his phone or correcting her grammar. And then there was the insurance policy. It wasn't Claire's idea. It had been Daniel's, part of his legacy planning, he said. One of those responsible husband moves. A $4 million life insurance policy with Claire as the sole beneficiary. She hadn't thought much about it when he first signed the papers. But it started whispering to her in the dark months that followed, long after the sex had stopped and the arguments had dried up into silence. 4 million. Enough to disappear, enough to start over, enough to be free. She didn't decide all at once. The thought began as a fantasy, an idle what if, that danced on the edge of her consciousness. But it grew roots. The days she watched him from across the breakfast table, lecturing her on diversifying portfolios. The nights he fell asleep mid-sentence, after 3 glasses of scotch and 2 hours of CNBC. She started looking up poisons in private tabs on her phone. Tasteless, odorless, undetectable. Ricin was too risky. Cyanide left a scent, but thallium was perfect, colorless, slow-acting, and hard to trace. She ordered it under a fake name, using a burner phone and a VPN. It arrived in a small, unmarked envelope. Just enough powder to make it look like a heart attack. She kept it hidden behind the lining of her makeup drawer for a week before she found the nerve to use it. She picked a night he was distracted. He always had bourbon with dinner. She laced just a little into the glass, not enough to kill him, just enough to start the symptoms. She needed him to get sick first. She needed it to look natural. At first, it worked like a charm. He started complaining about his stomach. Then came the headaches. He grew weaker each day. Claire played the doting wife with precision. Hot towels, chicken broth, gentle fingers brushing his hair back as he shivered under the silk sheets. He went to the doctor. They said it was a virus. His blood work came back inconclusive. Claire upped the dose. 2 weeks in, he could barely walk. He had lost 10 pounds. His skin was pale, waxy. She knew he was dying, and part of her started to feel it. Not guilt, not exactly, but fear. Fear that she was going too fast. Fear that someone would notice. But no one did. He barely spoke to his family. His friends were colleagues, and they only called when a deal was on the line. She had covered her tracks meticulously. No cameras, no witnesses, just slow death by devotion. Then came the day she didn't plan for. Daniel had been sleeping most of the afternoon. She was curled up on the chaise lounge reading The Secret History when she heard him stir. His voice came, rough and raspy. "Claire, can you come here?" She stood and walked slowly to the bed. "What is it, babe?" He looked up at her, eyes glassy. "I want to rewrite my will." Her heart skipped. She tried not to show it. "Why now? I don't feel good. Something's wrong. I want everything squared away." He coughed, and a fleck of blood landed on his lip. "Call Peter in the morning. He'll handle it." She kissed his forehead. "Of course, baby, whatever you need." But something twisted inside her. Why change the will now? Had he figured it out? No, he couldn't have. There was nothing to find. He was just being responsible like he always was. But still. The timing felt off. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake next to him, listening to the rise and fall of his breath. She couldn't risk him changing the will, not when she was so close. She decided it had to happen now. No more dragging it out. One more dose. A heavy one, enough to finish the job. The next evening, she made his drink with shaking hands. The thallium dissolved instantly. She brought it to him, and he drank it with barely a word. That night, he started seizing in bed. She called 911, playing her part to perfection. The tears, the panic, the wailing sobs. Paramedics came. They worked on him for 10 minutes before declaring him dead. Heart failure, they said. She collapsed into the arms of the lead paramedic and whispered, "He was my whole life." The next week was a blur. Funeral arrangements, sympathetic phone calls, flowers from people she hadn't spoken to in years. She wore black and kept her makeup minimal. Quiet Grace, the grieving widow. The insurance company began processing the claim. It was working. She had done it. Then the letter arrived. It was in a plain white envelope with no return address. Postmarked 2 days before Daniel died. She opened it in the kitchen, half distracted, expecting a sympathy card. What she found was a single sheet of paper, typed in courier font. "Claire, if you're reading this, I'm already dead. You think you've won, but you were never as clever as you believed. Enjoy the money, you're going to need it." Her knees buckled. She dropped the letter onto the floor and stared at it, pulse hammering in her ears. What did it mean? Was it a bluff? Had he known? Had he changed the will after all? She called his lawyer, Peter, the next morning. Daniel mentioned he wanted to update his will. Did he ever get a chance? There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Actually, yes. He emailed me the night before he died. We set up a virtual signing through DocuSign." It was last minute, but legally binding. Her stomach turned to stone. And did anything change? Yes, he added a secondary beneficiary. You're still the primary, of course, but in the event of foul play, he requested an automatic delay and investigation. That clause is unusual but not illegal. The insurance company has already been notified. Claire couldn't breathe. So, what happens now? Well, there's going to be a forensic autopsy. Independent, might take a few weeks. They'll be looking for toxins. She dropped the phone. Her perfect crime was unraveling. The letter, the clause. The investigation. He had known. Somehow he had known all along, and he had laid a trap, one that wouldn't snap until she thought she was safe. Her mind raced. Could she still run? Could she make it look like she was being framed? But it was already too late. That night, there was a knock at the door. 2 men in dark suits. They weren't cops. They introduced themselves as federal investigators working on behalf of the insurance company. "Just a few routine questions, Mrs. Hollister. May we come in?" Claire smiled her best smile. "Of course, gentlemen." But inside, everything was burning. And somewhere beneath the cold ground, Daniel was still smiling too. Claire stood in her living room, arms wrapped tightly around herself as the 2 federal agents combed through her home. Every drawer opened, every bottle examined. Her nerves were on fire, but her face remained calm. That was her greatest weapon, control. But control was slipping now, and she could feel it like a noose tightening around her neck. They didn't arrest her that night. They didn't even accuse her. But the silence afterward was louder than any interrogation. The life insurance payout was frozen. The autopsy was expedited. For weeks, she lived on edge, waiting, watching, trying to anticipate what would happen next, and then the call came. Claire Hollister, the voice said. "This is Detective Mendez with the Stamford Police Department. I'd like you to come in. We have some questions regarding your husband's toxicology report." That was it. No knock, no warning, just the slow drop into hell. She lawyered up immediately, claimed innocence, claimed grief. Claimed everything except responsibility. But the thallium had done its job too well, and left just enough behind to prove it. Coupled with the clause in Daniel's will, the prosecutors had more than enough to indict her. They charged her with first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and attempted obstruction of justice. The trial was a media frenzy. Beautiful widow, wealthy husband, slow poisoning, secret letter. Every tabloid and streaming service jumped on it like vultures. Her face was everywhere. Her past was dissected. Her texts, browser history, private messages, all turned into evidence. They painted her as a gold-digging social climber who married a man she never loved. And the worst part, it was mostly true. She was convicted in under 2 hours. Life without parole. But that wasn't the end. What no one realized, not even the investigators, was that Daniel's plan had one more layer. Claire sat in her cold prison cell 3 months after sentencing when she received a legal notice. It was from a Swiss trust company. The letter informed her that Daniel had transferred all his assets, every last cent of his investments, accounts, and holdings, into a private trust weeks before he died. The trust was set to release the $4 million insurance money and an additional $16 million in assets to someone else. The name listed on the trust made her eyes burn. Elena Santos, Daniel's assistant. She remembered her well. Mousy, quiet, invisible in the background, Claire had never considered her a threat, but Daniel had. Elena had been his shadow, his confidante, and now she was his revenge. The letter ended with one final line, printed in Daniel's signature courier font: "Money is power, and now you have neither." Claire screamed until her throat bled. Behind steel bars, with no money, no legacy, no name left untarnished, she finally realized the bitter truth. She hadn't just killed her husband, she had buried herself. The money she murdered for was gone. Her freedom was gone. Her reputation shattered. No lovers, no allies, no second chances. Just a cell, a number, and the memory of a man who outplayed her even in death. And in the cold silence of night, Claire finally saw the truth. She didn't just lose. She never stood a chance.